Welcome to the Patricia Fripp Sales Series, where you have the opportunity to meet some of the leading speakers, trainers, and presenters in the sales and speaking world. This episode is no different. I am thrilled to introduce a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, past president of the National Speakers Association, and I think fair to say legendary sales trainer. Don Hutson is the author or co-author of 14 books, and the most recent is Selling Value. And some of those ideas in that book will be presented in this session. So Don Hutson, please say hi to our live audience.
Hello, Patricia. Great being with you and with everyone who has tuned in with us today. And I'm always excited about sharing ideas about sales training and selling strategies. So great to be here.
Well, thank you, Don. The other very important part of our team is Paul. He is the moderator of all these events and will tell you how you can engage and run the polls for us. And of course, for those of you who are Fripp VT users, you know he is the Director of Client Experience. So Paul, tell our friends how they can engage.
Absolutely. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat box. Within that chat box, you can list your short, specific questions that will be answered during the call. Remember to get your questions in sooner rather than later so we have plenty of time to answer them. In addition to the chat area, we will be running some polling questions throughout the call. When the polling question comes up, click your answer, then click vote, and we'll discuss the results during the call as well.
Thank you, Paul. Now, Don Hutson, for over 3 decades, has been hired by companies of all sizes to improve their sales. For the past 5 to 7 years, his focus has been on how they can preserve their margin by selling value rather than focusing on the price. So, Don Hutson, how on earth can we sell value?
Well, I would never suggest that it's absolutely an easy thing to do, but they are learnable skills, Patricia. So we're going to talk about what we can do today to enhance that skill set. Number one, we've all heard the old cliche that people will do business with those they know, like, and trust. And I believe that's a true statement. But let's talk about that for just a moment. Have we earned the right to gain their trust? And what are we doing to gain it? And are we working at it over time in a judicious manner, staying in touch with people and making sure that we're aware of what their needs are along the way? And that's one of the things that will really help. I've got a philosophy that I want to share with everybody today. I believe that trust and stress are inversely proportional in business relationships. Now what that means is, let's put up the first slide, Paul. The undesirable method in selling would represent some of the things that people are doing wrong. So take a look, if you will, at the concept here of what we're talking about. When we say trust and stress are inversely proportional, the undesirable method would point out that essentially when trust is low and stress is high, what that really means is that we're not doing a good enough job of trust building. This, for example, would tend to point out why the door-to-door salesperson is no longer viable. There's not enough time to build trust. Or why the high-pressure method is totally archaic now. We've got to build the trust to be able to get that stress down. So if we do a good job of trust building, stress will come down. Now, on the undesirable model, you'll see that while trust is low and stress is high, the net effect of that is that we have a lousy conversion rate of prospects to buyers, highly inefficient. And we have a very long sales cycle. Now that long sales cycle is a measurement of time. We've all heard that the most effective salespeople are the men and the women who compress more achievement into a given measurable time frame than other people. So we need to work at keeping our sales cycles as short as we possibly can. What's the best way to do that? Let's be highly proficient at building trust. When we get rid of the stress, we increase the probability that we're on the track for a sale. So what does the desirable model look like? Notice that trust is much higher. Stress is much lower. So when the trust overwhelms any stress that might exist, We've got a much better track we're running on. We've got a better conversion rate of prospects to buyers, and we have really cut down drastically on the length of our sales cycle, so that measurement of time that is required to make a sale is much less, improving our efficiency greatly. So that talks about the concept there of what we need to do from the very outset in trying to create the right kind of relationships for selling today.
And if we are going to build trust, we do this with the needs analysis?
Well, I like to look at it like this, Patricia. The needs analysis is something that is an early critical part of the selling process. I think the worst thing in the world is for us to get our methodology out of sequence. In fact, Paul, this is a good time to do the first polling question. Why don't we put that up and let our audience participate and take a look at the options here of what kind of sequence that we might consider in terms of what comes first and when we do what we do. And there's one specific takeaway I want you to get from this polling question. So the question that's going to come up is, what is the proper sequence of these 4 steps to the sale?
So, Paul, tell us what the choices are. One is perform a needs analysis.
Yes, we have number 1 is perform a needs analysis. Number 2 is gain a commitment. Number 3 is secure the prospect. Number 4 is present your solution. And there are 3 options, multiple choice. So select which one that you think is the winner, and we'll discuss that shortly.
Okay, well, actually, more than multiple choice, this one is a determine the sequence, because all 4 of these things are things that we need to do. So if our first one that we want to consider would be the third element Paul mentioned, which is secure the prospect. We've got to get somebody to talk to. And hopefully we will be proficient at gaining referrals and doing everything that we can in the marketplace to get repeat business, get new opportunities, and be a very effective prospector for new business opportunities. So the first thing we've got to do is secure the prospect. Now, next is where the mistake is often made. The next step would be to position ourselves to get an appointment so that we can do a needs analysis. We can ask questions, the answers to which will give us a really good idea of how these people feel and what they're being troubled by and what kind of needs and wants they have right now. And the mistake that some salespeople make is they're so excited about telling their story that in telling their story, they get in, they see the people, they greet them properly and professionally, and maybe they have a good attitude and the stage is set pretty well, but they immediately get into telling their story. And if they present before doing a needs analysis, frankly, in my opinion, that's a sign of a lack of professionalism. We need to do the needs analysis first. And the reason we need to do it first is because we're going to learn a lot about them and their needs, and that will have an impact on what we say and how we say it in the presentation process. You know, Patricia, our old friend Jim Cathcart used to have a great line. He said that in selling, like in medicine, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. So needs analysis is the diagnosis. That's step 2. After we've done a good needs analysis, then we have largely earned the right to be able to tell our story or give our presentation, which I know we're going to get some great ideas from you on later in the call, Patricia. And then, of course, after we give our presentation and answer their questions and go through the normal process of communicating, we'll be in a position to have earned the right to gain their commitment. So the proper sequence would be secure the prospect, perform a needs analysis, then you give your presentation of your solutions, and ultimately you gain their commitment. So that's a sequence question that we're dealing with there. So the needs analysis is a critically important part of the selling process. You know, Fripp, years ago when we were participating in our early segment of our career, we used to hear all the time that, oh, the best salesperson is the one who is the effervescent, personality plus, expressive type of person who's really got the gift of gab. Now, we heard that for years and years and years. You know, there are companies today which have done studies that has proven that people who have a tendency toward introversion are sometimes more effective than those who are more extroverted. What would the explanation for that be? The explanation is people who are more introverted do a better focused job of asking questions, gathering information, and cataloging that data in an effective manner so they can refer back to it when they need it. So anybody can be effective in selling, and my philosophy is that everybody's got to sell anyway. Even if you're not in sales, every time you open your mouth and communicate with anyone, you want to be understood, you want to be effective, you want to be persuasive, you want to be convincing. This is a part of life. Fripp, I remember one of your great quotes, my favorite Patricia Fripp quote, that life is a series of
sales situations. Every day you sell yourself, your ideas, your point of view, your product, your service, or your value.
Absolutely. And even if it's just the selling of ideas from someone who's not even in sales, it's a critical part of the life process. So these are things that I think we need to make sure we keep in proper sequence when we're out there trying to do the best job we can of making sales in a tough competitive marketplace. So the value part, you know, I really had a great time writing the book Selling Value because it was my opportunity to talk to the marketplace about the idea of, you know, here's what is different today than what used to be the case, where we all learned in the early days of selling. So if we can do some things that will help us zero in on understanding, first and foremost, what value really is to the prospect we're talking to. Sometimes we get too wrapped up in keying on the value points that our marketing department gave us. Oh, hey, maybe they're eloquent, maybe they did great research, and maybe they've got some good answers. But think of your sales process as an opportunity to have a quiver in which you've got maybe 25 different arrows. And all of those arrows are opportunities to present the value of your product. Now, maybe 5 or 6 of them came from your marketing department. Maybe 2 or 3 came from your sales manager who trained you. But the multitude of the arrows where we will get the greatest results will be those that are articulated by our prospective buyers. Because if we can find out how they define value, then we're going to be in a position to create a value-based solution and hopefully do it better than our competition. So how good do we need to be at needs analysis and information gathering? The answer is we got to be better than our competitors because competition is keen in everybody's business today. So I think this whole concept of value is absolutely critical today if we're going to be truly effective in the sales arena.
And in our needs analysis, obviously the path to selling is to ask good questions?
Well, absolutely. That's part of the process. We've got to ask some really good questions. First, I want to show the illustration of the value chain. Paul, can you put that one up for us, please?
And when you've done that, Paul, we should actually see the result of the poll because we have 75% of our audience clicked on the 3-1-4-2 formula. We're 72% of, or 75% of the live audience, understanding a lot will watch the replay. Is that the right formula? That's right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Good.
Very good. We've got an astute, sharp audience today. That's great. Okay, on this value chain illustration, we created this for the book and all the research we did. I think it starts off with managerial premise. The senior VP has a big annual sales meeting and says, okay, we have done great research. We know we have superior products and we've got a great opportunity to be able to present them to the marketplace. We're not going to go in as the cheapest option. We're going to go in at one of the more expensive options because we want to preserve our margin and we deserve it. We've got the best option in the marketplace. So from that you create the value proposition. And I'll talk in just a moment about exactly what the value proposition is. After that value proposition is known as to how we're positioning things, then we have the management of expectations with our prospective clients. We not only manage their expectations, we do everything we can to make sure they're going to understand many of the options available to them over time. This is part of the needs analysis. It's a part of the presentation process. Ultimately, we get into the stage we call alignment, and alignment is when we actually gain the commitment of the buyer, and we do everything we can at that point to be able to present that very powerful solution that's going to enable you to do it. So once we get the yes, then we deliver the product, service, or idea, get the solution in place, and then finally the reinforcement process That's where we want to do everything we can to be service-minded and stay in touch with people and to make sure that our product, service, or idea is working for them. If they've got a poor process of implementation, maybe we need to help them tweak their processes of implementation. So reinforcement is very desirable because that's what is going to result in repeat business, not only of the product, service, or idea you sold this time, but get them in a position to be accepting of you and your solutions so that they're open-minded to your crafting the next solution to their next problem. So that's how the value chain works. Now let's talk a little more about the value proposition. Put that definition up, if you will, Paul. The value proposition, this is the perceived value and benefits embedded within an organization's deliverables in the context of the investment required for its acquisition. Now, it could be their first impression of your value proposition might be insufficient. Maybe in actuality, it's this good, but they only think it's this good. So that means we have some selling to do. We have to do that needs analysis. We have to position the solution that we think is going to be most effective for them. And if we'll do that, we're going to create more value throughout this process. So we want to get those embedded value points out there very early. And that means your presentation to prospect A this morning might be very different to your prospect B this afternoon. We don't sell everybody the same way. We learned that years ago in behavioral styles. Yes. And it's true in behavioral styles, but it's also true in terms of the differences and the nuances of different buyers having different needs and wants in that sales process. So I think that might answer your question a little bit about how we position value, Patricia.
Yes.
So now back to your earlier question. Thank you for letting me preempt this process.
No, this is you're in charge.
Okay.
And you'll be interested to know Tony Alexander was one of our last guests, and he of course talked about how to sell the way people want to buy, which ties in perfectly to what you're saying. So our listeners should have more of an understanding of how that works. So that's great.
I considered that in creation of the content today.
Yeah.
Because I was one of your participants last time.
Good.
Okay, so let's talk about asking questions.
Okay.
And I want to give you a couple of premises to be thinking about. And let's go, if we can, to polling question number 2, Paul. Can you get that one up? Polling question number 2.
And we have complete the following statement. The better the question you ask, and then there are 3 options. The more pushback you will get on your sales process, the more confused your prospect will become, and the better and more in-depth the answers you will get. The poll will be up for just about 60 seconds, and then Don will discuss the answer when it's completed.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. These are great questions, Don. So our listeners really have to think about the answer. That's very good. Often some of the questions we use are just yes and no, but this is very good. And after they've answered the poll, Don, we will be talking about the types of questions that you ask and examples. Is that right?
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Paul, why don't you repeat those 3 choices for our participants today?
I think based on how many people have answered so far, they're 100%. But Paul, do it and then just see in case anyone hasn't answered yet or it might change their mind.
All right, so complete the following statement. The better the questions you ask, the more pushback you will get on your sales process, the more confused your prospect will become, and the better and more in-depth the answers you will get.
And the poll says?
100% the better and more in-depth the answers you will get.
Okay, great. Our astute audience has come through again. Let's talk about the options for a moment. Yeah. So if we ask really good questions, we get pushback from our sales process. That would only happen when you have an unsophisticated buyer who's never heard a question like that before. And maybe doesn't want to share too much information openly. So not the best choice to answer this question. Number 2, the better the questions you ask, the more confused your prospect will become. This reminds me of the technique I heard many, many years ago. A terrible suggestion. If you can't convince them, confuse them. Well, that's manipulation in the worst order. We certainly don't want to go there. So then the best answer is the better the question you ask, the better and more in-depth the answers you will get. Let me tell you, the best kind of question you can ask is one that makes that prospective buyer look up and think and maybe even rub their chin as if to imply, or sometimes they'll even say, wow, that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever had a salesperson ask me that before. When you hear that, you know you've asked a really, really good question. So when we give a lot of thought to the questions we're going to ask and how we're going to go about doing this in the best possible manner, we're going to school up on that. Again, these are all learnable skills, so our recommendation is become a student of this process of asking questions.
Yeah.
Now, as far as some of the types, in selling value, there are several pages of ideas on different types of questions. What we've come up with today are 3 different types of questions. And the first one is what we call front-loaded questions. An example of a front-loaded question, there are 2 different types. One would be industry-related, and that's where you might say, in light of the limited activity in the oil field today, what has this done to your basic market segment and market share? So your industry-related question tells them you're doing your homework and you know what's going on in their industry. You could also have a prospect-centered question. You might say something like, I noticed on your website that you had a senior VP who said that your principal value that you subscribe to right now is to keep customers happy at all costs. Is that still the premise under which you do business today? And if they say, well, yes, it really is. In fact, it's probably a more important premise today than it was when that went up 5 months ago. But this tells you that you understand the values of their company. It is a prospect-centered question. Most salespeople don't have a clue about these things because they don't do their homework prior to their sales call. I know everyone tuning into this call today is not guilty of that, but a lot of people are. So let's ask front-loaded questions when we can, which the prospect immediately becomes very gratified by the fact that you did your homework before you showed up today. Now, another example would be what we call a pain point question. And a pain point question would be something that will help you identify what's really bothering you. It's become cliche. I kind of hate to use the phrase, but we've heard it so much. What keeps you up at night? I don't think you want to ask that one, but philosophically, that's what you're doing. You want to say, tell me about some of the things which with your current vendor have become problematical in the last 6 months. That's a pretty pointed question. And if you're not the incumbent vendor, you want to find out, where is that competitor vulnerable right now? Where's your window of opportunity? And sometimes you're going to have somebody who's going to say, you know what, I appreciate you coming by and I appreciate the fact that you've done your homework, but we're really very happy with our current supplier. Well, you need to do everything you can to counteract that and sell value better than their current supplier. But at the very least, be the best you can be with your interpersonal skills and build trust. And do all that you can so that when that incumbent supplier screws up and the window of opportunity presents itself, you are number one on the windowsill. Okay. Because you've got the opportunity there to get some good business. You'll notice, I'm sure by now, the dog's at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
All right, here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever asked a prospect a question and they give you that RCA Victor dog look?
Yeah.
Where they cock their head. And maybe it's like a question they've never been asked before. As I alluded to earlier, let's ask well thought out, well worded, creative questions, and let's try to come up with some that we would think they've never been asked before. Because what that's going to do is create a factor of inquisitiveness. It's going to help you differentiate from the masses of salespeople that are calling on that purchasing agent or that prospective buyer every single day. Let me give you one more question type to be thinking about. We call this one the competitive leverage question. The competitive leverage question might go like this. Mr. Prospect, tell me, when your current vendor last had your annual review where you talked about visions for the future and ideas as to how they could improve their solutions in the coming year, what are some of the things they came up with that are going to benefit you? Now, why is that a really good question? Well, number one, it's a good question because their incumbent vendor probably didn't even do that. But there's a trick back there. It means that if you're going to ask that question, you need to be in a position to make sure you do it if you do earn their business. These annual reviews can be great. Why is this annual review with a prospect so great? If you're in the incumbent vendor, you want to go in there and you want to say, here's a review of what we've done in the past year, and we certainly appreciate every bit of your business. But I know that you've shared with me some frustrations on a few different fronts, and I want to present to you today some ideas that I think can diffuse some of those problems and grease the skids for better solutions so that you can maintain or advance your efficiency through doing business with us. And then we come up with more creative solutions. We don't want to just go in as the salesperson who would say, you don't need anything today, do you? Or how about some more of the same old stuff I've been selling you? Don't want to do that. We want to go in with new and creative solutions.
Okay.
And that's going to play to this concept of differentiation we're going to get to in just a moment. So, Fripp, you got any other questions at this point?
Wow. Well, I know that you're very well known about teaching your clients about 7 types of differentiation. However, let's hold there just for a moment, Don. I'm sure everyone's as engaged as I am. However, Paul, are there any questions that our audiences send in that we should pose to Don before I ask my next one?
Not right now.
Okay, good, fine. They're like me, hanging on your every word. It would be, I think you've just proved on why you've been in demand for over 3 decades. So, all right, tell us about what your clients pay big bucks to hear about the 7 types of differentiation.
Okay, well, let's remember that as we come into play with a prospective buyer, the more value we bring to the table, and that's value as defined by the prospective buyer. We're working diligently to define their value points. And again, it can vary greatly from prospect to prospect. So as we do that, we want to be able to create differentiators which will really set us apart. Because it's the degree to which we are different from, better than, and superior to our competition that will earn us the right to get higher prices and to preserve our margin. You see, I got to be frank, and I don't want to offend anybody in sales who's tuned in with us today. Many of you are tuned in or in sales management, but there's one thing that I say in speeches from time to time, and that is there are some salespeople who will work harder to sell their sales manager on a price cut than they will to sell that prospect on the current rate card. And the sales manager stands up and claps. The salespeople look at me like a tree full of owls. They don't like that one very much.
All right.
So I'm not trying to be incriminating to salespeople, but I am suggesting we want to make sure that we are the value-based solution to be able to get the best pricing we possibly can. So to do that, the answer, I think, is differentiation.
Okay.
Now, I would ask this question. How many of you in this audience today are selling a commodity? Is there a way, Paul, they can click on the check mark or just raise their hand?
Paul can Paul can make a poll. Are you selling a commodity, yes or no? Paul will put that up just on the fly, so don't worry. We'll keep going, but they can answer.
All right, do your magic, Paul, and ask that question of our audience, because I want to know what kind of response we get. And in determining that, if you're selling a commodity is defined as a product, service, or idea that is available from multiple sources in the marketplace. And if it's out there readily available and it's available from multiple sources, that would probably be a commodity. So some salespeople throw their hands up and they say, we're selling a commodity. How can I sell value? And the answer is there are ways to differentiate that don't have to do with the product itself. But most people think there are 2 types of differentiation, product and price. Well, those are 2 of the 7. Our U.S. learning model and our selling value concept deals with 7 types of differentiation. So, Paul, can you tell us what kind of results we got from that question?
Absolutely. We have, 65% are not selling a commodity and 35% are.
Okay, very good. So what does that tell us? 35% of you out there think that you are largely vulnerable to price and price alone. And I'm not going to make light of this because I know this is a very difficult and trying situation. But it does give you the opportunity to differentiate in manners that do not have to do with price. And let's talk about some of those things. Maybe it has something to do with shipping or date of availability. Maybe it has something to do with the terms your company can offer. Price is not the only thing, is my point. So let's talk about what some of the other things are. If there are 7 types of differentiation, first and foremost, we will admit that product differentiation is number 1. By the way, if you're selling something, maybe it is or maybe it isn't a commodity, but it really is kind of a tired product that hasn't had very many changes through the recent years. Hey, go to your research people in your company. And salespeople need to get together and say, we want to talk about what we can do to advance our product. Let's tap our collective intellect and let's tell our product development people some of the things our customers are telling us so that we can come up with a more compelling offering in the marketplace. So product differentiation, if it is different from and better than the competition, you've got a leg up for sure. So that's product differentiation. Next, we have experiential differentiation. Now, what does that mean? Well, that is the experience they have in doing business with you. It's also known as the service model. Well, we all know that it's 6 times more expensive to get a new customer as it is to keep an existing one happy. So let's make sure that we are tuned in to providing great service. Let's give people great experiences. You know, in great, rich, beautiful America as we know it today, even in a down economy from time to time, people today are used to getting pretty darn good service. As a result of that, the bar gets higher and higher every single year on our service model that we've got to render. Let's give them an experience. Let's do everything we can to take them to the next level in terms of how they are enjoying doing business with us. Maybe that's taking paperwork to a client's home at 9 o'clock at night because he's leaving at 8 o'clock the next morning and he needs to get this done. Who knows what it might be? It's something that provides convenience. It's something that provides a mental peace and the concept of convenience for the prospective buyer. So experiential. We've all heard some of those really cool stories about experiences. Let's make sure we deliver them from time to time. All right, let's go to number 3, Paul. We have relationship differentiation. You know, Tony Alessandra and Phil Wexler wrote a book years ago called Non-Manipulative Selling. I want to tell you what, in my opinion, was the best line in the book. They said, if 2 people want to do business together, the details are probably not going to get in the way. But if either one of the 2 does not want to do business with the other, that deal's not coming together. That, friends, is the power of relationships. And that's the reason we talk so much about building trust and having a contagion of positiveness in dealing with people and delivering to them the kind of an attitude and a spirit and a service orientation that they truly appreciate. And if they see that you're working hard to build trust and you're staying in touch and you're communicating with them in an effective manner, you're going to be able to build and advance that relationship over time. So that's relationship differentiation. Let's go to number 4 now, Paul. It's called process differentiation. That's how you do what you do. What is your process of doing business? Well, maybe you call on a customer and he says, you know, Patricia, you guys have been doing a nice job for us, but let me tell you one little thing that really bugs me. You know, if you guys could get your invoices to us prior to the 10th, that's our cutoff date, and we can not only pay you more proficiently, we're going to be able to have you get your money quicker if you can get us invoices all before the 10th, because we usually get them on the 12th to 15th of the month. You think you can make that happen? So what do? You want to be a person who's responsible for trying to tweak some of the processes internally within the company you work for. So you go back to accounts receivable and you ask the manager, is there a way we can get them their invoices in such a manner that they will get them by the 8th or 9th rather than after the 10th, because they can pay us quicker? Hey, if you can't sell that deal, you're not very persuasive, because the company ought to want to get the money as fast as they can. But it's an example of tweaking and fine-tuning processes to be more customer-friendly. So process differentiation. Every now and then, you're going to get a special request from a customer. You need to say, let me see if I can make that happen. I know just who to talk to, and I think we can make some headway on that. Give them a little bit of hope and promise, and then go to work to do some internal selling to make it happen. So after process differentiation, we have technological differentiation. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you've got modern technology, whether it's incorporated into your product or your process of doing business, the modern technology pays off well. How about technology in terms of communications? That's important today. Look at all the options that are open to us through social media. And I had a salesperson in a seminar recently who said, Don, how should I communicate with my customers in this day of all these options that we've got? And I said, well, it's a good question. But the answer is you need to communicate with each customer in the manner in which they prefer to be communicated with. Salespeople can no longer be inflexible and do things the way they've always done them. Had a guy in another program a while back, and he said, Don, you know, you're talking about communications today, and we've got all these different generations of all these people. He said the DMU of this one company I'm trying to sell, DMU being decision-making unit, he said the DMU was 4 people, 4 decision influencers. He said there was one person they put me in closest touch with who was my contact with that company, and he was a sharp guy, but he was only 26 years old, and I'm really upset with him because he won't return my phone call. I said, okay, let's talk about it. How old is he? 26. How old are you? Well, I'm 56. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but you might as well have sent him smoke signals. He ain't going to return your phone call. Well, the audience laughed and got a big kick out of it, but the fact is, a 26-year-old is a millennial who, if you can't text, you're not going to communicate with that person.
Exactly.
We need to communicate with people. We need to be knowledgeable about technology in a manner that will help us serve people the way they want to be served. And if we can bring them advanced technology in terms of our products and solutions, great. Advanced technology in terms of our process of doing business, fantastic. But let's be prepared to be cutting edge when we are being compared to the competition, and that'll give us a differentiated edge. Number 6 is what we call marketing differentiation. Now, historically, marketing has had, it's been a 3-legged stool with sales, public relations, and I'm having a Rick Perry moment here. Sales, public relations, and advertising.
Yeah.
I think today we have a 4th leg to the stool, and that's social media. All of that is a part of marketing and how we stay in touch with people and how we try to build the value over time. And here's the point that I would like to make. If you can outsell your competition, and if your sales trainer is better than their sales trainer, you got a pretty good shot at getting that business, even if all the other things are the same. Are you better at building trust? Are you better at communicating in a manner in which the prospect wants to communicate? Are you just right in terms of the frequency with which you stay in touch with your prospective buyers? I think all these things are critically important, but generally speaking, if you can outsell your competition when all other things are the same, you've got an edge. Now, the 7th type of differentiation is what we call price. And you'll notice on your visual, when Paul pulls it up, it's in red. And that is for a word of caution. Don't cave early on price. Preserve your margin. You know, in a simplistic example, if you're selling a product that costs $1,000, and let's say your cost of goods sold to your company is $600, you got 40 percentage points or $400 of gross margin there. And you think, well, you know what, if we cut our price 25%, boy, that's a big gash, because you've taken your gross margin from 400 down to 150, haven't you? And that is vicious in terms of trying to make the numbers work. So the salesperson says, well, I'll only cut the price 10%. Well, you cut it 10% and you still have given away 25% of your gross margin, or 100 of the $400. So do not underestimate the negative impact of price cutting. Now, let's talk about a couple of things regarding price. Remember that when we talk about price, it's not just the reduction of price. Sometimes there are discussions about increasing prices and creating the justification for doing so. There's some other things. How about someone's ability to pay certain prices? I love the story of the two Rolls-Royce salesmen who were standing in their dealership in Indianapolis talking early one morning, and this old man walked in to the Rolls-Royce dealership, and he had on coveralls, and the knees were torn out, and there was grass stain all over him, and he really looked abhorrent. And this one salesperson said to the other, look, I know I'm up for the next prospect, but you can have this guy. He's not going to buy any Rolls-Royces. The other guy said, I'll take him. It's not like they have people flooding their showroom every day anyway. He walked over to the old man, who by then was standing next to a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud on the showroom floor. He greeted him professionally and politely. He spent 40 minutes with the gentleman, and the gentleman bought two, one for his wife and one for himself. And then Dr. Lilly of the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company went back home and finished his yard work. What's the point of the story? Sometimes we're selling something that's top of the line. We still have to show value. We have to show initiative in relationship development, and don't ever prejudge in any way a prospective buyer. Maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, you could tell by the way somebody dressed how much money they had. Not anymore. You see billionaires with no socks. Hey, let's look at it like an open book. Let's make sure that we are not prejudicial in terms of trying to evaluate what someone's capability to buy is. I look at it this way. Anytime you've got a prospect you're spending time with, you owe it to yourself and your company every single time to give it your best shot. The best shot in needs analysis, the best shot in delivering your presentation, because if you'll do that, you're going to get some people who are on the fence who might have otherwise said no to you, and you're also going to demonstrate that you're not prejudicial in your thinking. You're going to give it your best shot with everybody. If you're talking to them anyway, why not give that sales effort your best shot? So, Patricia,
all right, Don.
Okay, so those are some of the things I wanted to share today, and I hope that's meaningful.
That absolutely incredible. And our Paul, Paul, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. 33% of our audience live, I can't speak for those who are going to watch the replay, are selling a commodity. 67% are not.
Okay.
And just a couple of notes that I've made based on what you said, Don. When it comes to questions, one of the phrases I use in my seminars, which totally reinforce what you're saying, is the key to connection is conversation. The secret of conversation is to ask questions. And the quality of the information you receive depends on the quality of your questions, which is absolutely exactly what you were saying with the quality of questions, with the needs analysis, especially if you can come up with questions that they have to think or that aren't mundane. Everybody else asks them those questions.
Yeah, and that's great.
Again, we never want to sound the same as everybody else if we want to have an edge. So the idea of what keeps you up at night, the concept is good. You have to find your own way of asking the question that they don't feel they've been asked the same question 6 times in the last month. Yeah. And talking about the use of technology, both of us are serving our clients with technology, so we're going to go over and look at the ways that we are using absolutely the best technology to serve our clients. But Paul, are there any burning, short, specific questions that we need to ask Don before we do that?
There are not any questions related to the content. Just wanted to remind everyone real quick that you will get a replay of this meeting, so you'll be able to review it if you have to run and go, and you'll get a follow-up email as well.
Okay, perfect. So Dawn, One, we both have interactive online training reinforcing our ideas, because you've probably heard the statistic, and this is the dirty secret in the training industry, and Don and I have both made a very comfortable living. Now, I have to tell you, Don was a superstar when I first turned up at the National Speakers Association.
But you were the first female president.
Well, that's true. Yes, NSA grew up in the 10th year, the same year I grew up and went full-time as a speaker. We won't tell everyone what year it was, or they realize maybe we were helping people for more than 3 decades. Anyway, the dirty secret is when you have a great speaker, which obviously you can tell Don is, and hopefully my audiences would agree as well. 2, with good content and an audience that is genuinely interested in it. 2 weeks after, they will have forgotten 70% of what they heard. Now, the 30% can make major difference. The only way you really incorporate all the techniques that Don is introducing to you, and what I do in my work is, once you have the prospect, how do you have a competitive edge with the way you present to them, is through repetition and reinforcement. So, right. Don, let's just go over, and Paul, if you can take us over, let's look at Don's virtual training, which is uslearningvt.com. And certainly we will send the links to all this. So tell us, Don, what do people learn and see in your US Learning VT?
Well, our primary course that I wanted to mention today is Sell Value, Not Price, which features myself. And it's a 32-chapter program that's in 4 different courses. And basically, it's a combination of advanced but critically important skills, and also starting off with some basic elements, but things that we know we've got to incorporate into our MO in selling, like mastering the head game. If we don't have a good attitude, we might as well stay at the house. That's critically important. So mastering the head game goes into attitude, motivation, handling change, our selling style, dealing with rejection, a high-performance model, and how to be a trusted advisor. So if we get that all incorporated into our brain, where we know what we've got to do to be and do our best every single day psychologically, we're going to be ahead of the game. Course 2 goes into your blueprint for sales success, on goal setting, goal achievement, time management, market share, customer loyalty, and the loyalty ladder, and then the image of excellence. And those elements help advance us into how-tos for how we can be our best. Then we get into the interactive part of selling with Course 3, Understanding Your Customer, where we talk about behavioral styles and how to adapt to the different styles and to sell them the way they like to be sold, which is critically important through adaptability. And then we talk about needs analysis, active listening, how to ask advanced questions, and sales negotiations. Course 4 is securing and growing the business. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we're going to get the order. But we've got to do all these other things to earn the right to get to the part of gaining commitments. So here's where we talk about the value-price dynamic, differentiation, presenting your prospect solutions, performing miracles for your customers. That's doing a great job of the experiential piece, addressing prospects' concerns, how to gain commitments, relationship strategies, and how to gain referrals. So that by the time they get to Course 4, they've got a very strong foundation on the earlier elements that will enable them to put this to work for them. I agree with you, Patricia, that repetition is the mother of learning. And while we suggest that people go through this program 1 chapter a week, that would be 32 weeks or about 8 months. For the full year subscription, they can then go back and review all the various different things that represent what they need to bone up on and get additional skills on. But essentially, if you can spend 1 week on one skill and maybe engage in it 2 or 3 times, take the quiz, and there's a quiz with each chapter, and after passing all the quizzes, the 32 in 8 months, you become certified and get your CPS designation for a certified professional salesperson. And basically, it's like a several-day seminar with Don Hutson. We've got live video in it, and part of it's studio done, and part of it is interactive. It's a production process, which frankly was very expensive to produce, but my thought was, let's make it the best thing out there, and we're not apologetic about any aspect of the program, and our customers will find it much easier to be engaged in it and get maximum benefit from it.
Perfect.
And the program is, our webinar special is $499 per person, a little bit more than a cup of coffee a day if you're buying cheap.
Yeah.
And that's basically the special that we have here for those who'd like to sign up for today.
Okay. And Paul, if you can go over to Fripp VT, which is certainly then when you get in front of your prospect. In fact, Paul, why don't you, just because the quality is the same with Don's and mine and any other of our friends that have this platform, can you go into the sales course, and let's just look at the beginning of chapter 1 of Superstar Sales Presentations. And what you will notice is how we do speak. We're looking just at you, and just with Don's, this is highly interactive. Unlike a video or a DVD, you have to engage. You can't just listen and watch. Great though those programs are, this you have to actually talk to us. So go into chapter 1. Well, it's not quite as awake as I am.
Just 1 second, I apologize.
All right. Life is a series of sales situations. Every day you sell yourself, your ideas, your value, your point of view, your product, or your service. Every sales conversation and presentation is a missed or captured opportunity. If you sound the same as everybody else, you have no advantage. This course is looking at what you are learning about effective presentations, specifically as it relates to the sales process.
All
right, so that gives you a sample. Both Don and I have trials that you can try out to see the format to make sure that you are very comfortable with it. In Fripp VT, we have 12 different courses, of which Superstar Sales Presentations is one of the longest, and many of our clients invest in that mainly for that one course. So just get a free trial, send your name and email, and the same with Don, name and email, and you can have access to your trial. So if I may, Don, just pick up on exactly what you said, because in yesterday's world, which we were all getting training, if you're 26 years old, you don't remember yesterday's world as we are discussing here. However, salespeople followed a certain formula on how they structured their presentations. And I have to admit, many of my clients, when I first worked with them, follow a very similar format. And this is who I am, this is who I work with, this is what we do, this is our unique methodology, these are the clients that we work with, and we'd love to help you. If you take what Don said about the question of the idea of asking good questions, that is the formula to how we recommend you structure your presentation. So my approach is, if you're going to differentiate yourself from your competition, you don't want to sound like everyone else. So, for example, by the time you've gone through all the process that Don has talked about, you are now in front of decision makers. Maybe it's a management team or the marketing team, or you're then there, And there is a recommended format. One, don't start with, hello, my name is. I suggest that even if they do not know exactly who you are, you don't introduce yourself first off. The chances are, if you're getting to this level of a conversation, they know exactly who you are and who you represent. So my recommendation is, any pleasantries out the way, it's congratulations. If we work on the principle that people are more interested in themselves, their own product, their own success, and their own company, focus on them first. So congratulations. What are they proud of? What do they have the right to be proud of? And if it is a lesser known fact that is not advertised, then you get extra points. But certainly, congratulations, your new website is spectacular, or congratulations, your market share is up 3 points when most of your competition is down. Obviously, your strategy and decision making is sound. Then, never thank people for their time. Everyone selling a low cost product or service says that. You don't want to sound the same as everyone else. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss how the Fripp presentation training could well be the option that you're looking for. Now is the time to introduce yourself if you have not done so. In case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, because you might have met some people in advance but not everyone. In case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Patricia Fripp. And in my role as your account executive, now freeze frame, you don't have the business yet. However, start talking, give them language that you belong to them. In your account management, you can feel confident that based on now 15 years in our industry, helping clients of your size and complexity, then obviously to get to this level, you've had a champion, you've had somebody to work with. So you might say, John has been very generous with his time and information. And he's told me your biggest challenges are your greatest concerns, your areas of opportunity, or what you're most interested in learning. So again, you're taking what Don has suggested with the questioning, and that is the strategy, that is the structure around the foundation of your presentation. Now, as you are discussing their challenges or opportunities or interests, then within the presentation, you can introduce, for 16 years, we have focused on this. You can talk about other clients in a similar situation. That's when you're giving your social proof, your other satisfied client stories. So that's a few suggestions that build on Don's ideas. And I know we have to honor everybody's time. I did see, Paul, there was a question from Aiden for Don.
Yes, there was a question about the differentiations. He said that he got 6 out of the 7, but he wanted to know if we could address the marketing differentiation issue again briefly. And if we don't have time for that, then of course I'd let him know that we'll answer that via email.
Sure.
So can you give us a 3-sentence answer, Don?
Very quickly. Of the multiple components of marketing, we're focused today on the sales process, which is a part of marketing. If you can outsell your competition and you amass the best skills, you're going to get market share you wouldn't otherwise get. That's the takeaway. Be better than your competition. So I love to ask people, have you read the last 5 books that have come out on professional selling? And if you have, congratulations. And if not, why not? There's always something more to learn. In writing Selling Value, I think I researched probably 40 different books that have come out in the last few years on professional selling, and used that, and I gave attribution to the authors, but it's a collective process of gaining ideas, which once we get them ingrained and we internalize them, like we do through repetition, Patricia, to your point, then we're going to have them available as reflex actions. Salespeople can only sell as well as their reflex actions. And when we know them so well that they just flow when they need to flow, that's what's going to take us to greatness in selling.
And this is why when you have your sales presentation, you need to internalize it. You need to do some rehearsal. You need to make, challenge yourself. What is in this sales conversation or presentation, or as Dawn said, the initial needs analysis calls that obviously you designed and you put in to focus on this prospect or this client.
Yep.
Prove that you're earning the business long before you have it. Now, Paul, and if you perhaps you've already put in the chat box, if anyone is interested in Dawn's book, the best place to get it is Dawn Hutson. That's Hutson. DawnHutson.com. If you have any questions, certainly you can send them to Dawn. If they're in the chat box, we haven't got them, and for that, Dawn, we will send them over. But the best email for you, Dawn, is dawn@dawnhutson.com.
Right? That'll do it every time.
Okay, perfect. And certainly we invite you to take a free trial at uslearningvt.com. If you are not a Fripp VT user, please go to frippvt.com and get a free trial as well. You'll have a chapter on openings, stories, and sales. So do you have a concluding comment, Don?
Well, only to say that it's a great pleasure working with you, Patricia, and it has been for many times through the years. You're the consummate pro, and I just hope someday I'll be able to say advantage like you.
Good. We certainly appreciate whether you're live or watch the replay that you tune in for the Fripp Sales Seminar Series. One of our very good friends, also Hall of Fame keynote speaker, past president of the National Speakers Association, best-selling author on customer service, Shep Hyken, and this is going to be on the 8th of June. If you signed up for this webinar, you will be invited to that, and that is how customer service helps drive sales. And every week or couple of weeks, we will be inviting you to other events that I promise you will help improve your presentations and help drive sales. Thank you so much, Dawn Hutson. Look forward to seeing you at the NSA and Speakers Roundtable. And for our wonderful viewers, thank you. And remember, all learning requires repetition and reinforcement. As Don said, you need to be better than your competition. See you soon.